Modern technology, it seems, can confirm that there was a man called Moses, that there was a massive exodus of people out of Egypt, and that these people did cross the Red Sea and go into the ancient land of Midian, now Saudi Arabia. But was Moses responsible for this book, the Torah, or what we commonly refer to today as the first 5 books of the Bible? And can modern technology confirm what may be the most fantastic biblical discovery of all time, the existence of the Bible code? To find the answer to that question, we must first try and determine how the Torah was actually written. This is important because if the code exists, the plain text would have to be the same today as it was when Moses brought it down from the mountain. After nearly 4,000 years of copying and translation, is that even remotely possible? Dr. Eliyahu Rips decided to find an answer to that question, and in 1982 began an intensive study designed to prove or disprove once and for all the ancient Jewish tradition that holds there are hidden messages encrypted in the Torah. It was 12 years before the completed study was published and came to the attention of Harold Gans. Since that study, the mystery of the Bible codes has sparked worldwide interest in the ancient text and sparked intense debate among scientists and biblical scholars alike. But is the idea of some sort of code in the Bible really new? What, if anything, does the Bible itself have to say about hidden or sealed information within its pages? Haven't there been others over the centuries who have tried to uncover hidden secrets in the pages of the Bible? What, if anything, did they discover? In the next few minutes, we'll try to provide answers to those questions and to what is perhaps the most intriguing question of all. After centuries of being on opposite sides, will science and religion finally come together in a single expression of truth? There are those who suggest they already have. When you stop to think about it, the Bible is truly an amazing book. It took 1,500 years to complete, 40 different writers contributed to its content in 3 languages, and as we know it today, it contains 66 books in 2 testaments, the Old and the New. The question that comes immediately to mind is, how could something so long in the making, so complex, and with so many different authors, possibly contain a code of any kind?
There's an ancient tradition among Jews concerning the Torah. This tradition claims that unlike all other books of Scripture, the Torah alone was not merely inspired, it was dictated directly by God to Moses in a precise letter-by-letter sequence without punctuation or spaces between words.
Jews and Christians alike have long considered the words of the Bible to be divinely inspired. But this tradition suggests something different, something far more astounding. It suggests that God literally wrote the Torah. And if that's true, then we have to ask, is there any evidence that this tradition has some basis in fact?
Well, we need to understand that in the ancient texts, there were no spaces between the words. Scholars call this form of writing scripta continua. In other words, it was just a stream of letters. You inferred where the spaces between the words occurred. Archaeologists have discovered 22-line inscription this way. This is a pretty well-established fact in archaeology. The spaces between the words as we're used to it apparently were introduced during the days of Ezra, much later, of course, than the days of Moses.
The tradition, it seems, does have some archaeological support. That means that in the 40 days and 40 nights Moses was on Mount Sinai, he was busy writing down, in precise sequence, the entire 304,805 letters of the Torah. The question that jumps out at us is why? What could be the reason for requiring such a strict and difficult construction?
It is also part of the tradition that within the precise sequence of letters there is encrypted information of a sort that only a divine hand could have placed there. However quaint and absurd that might seem, the tradition has a long and highly respected history. Nachmanides, one of the great Jewish sages, teaching in the 12th century, told his students that all of Israel's history could be found in Deuteronomy 32, commonly known as the Song of Moses. Another outstanding rabbi and teacher, who lived and died in the 13th century, Rabbi Bachya ben Asher of Saragossa, Spain, described a process whereby the skipping of equal intervals of letters in the Torah could lead to obtaining divinely ordained information. And in the 18th century, One of the greatest of the post-biblical sages, Elijah Solomon, known reverently as the Great One of Vilna, made the startling claim that all that was, is, and will be unto the end of time is included in the Torah. While these are only opinions, they are without question the opinions of some of the greatest Torah scholars of all time. Their influence on Jewish tradition cannot be overestimated.
It seems pretty clear that the idea of some kind of coded information in the Bible, specifically the Torah, has been with us for centuries. Would it surprise you to learn that the concept was not only believed, but actually enlarged upon by one of history's most famous scientists? Sir Isaac Newton served as provost of Cambridge University for many years and is generally regarded as the first modern scientist. It is Newton who figured out the mechanics of the solar system and is credited with the discovery of the functions of gravity. He was also a firm believer in a biblical code.
Sir Isaac Newton, who was better at it than anyone, said that the entire universe, not just the Bible, the entire universe was a cryptogram, a code set by the Almighty. And it was up to us to unravel this puzzle. And he, of course, also looked for a code that he was sure existed in the Bible that would reveal the future of mankind.
Newton left many of his personal papers at Cambridge when he retired. His biographer, John Maynard Keynes, discovered the papers and was shocked to learn that most of the 1 million or more words in Newton's own handwriting had nothing to do with mathematics or astronomy, but rather esoteric theology. Newton was a firm believer in a Bible code. He was so certain there was a hidden code in the Bible that he spent over half his life trying to decipher it. The secret of the Bible code, if indeed it existed at all, would remain hidden for another 300 years. Ironically, it would be the greatest tragedy in Jewish history that would set the stage for the scientific discovery of coded information in the Bible. World War I had proven that being able to break enemy codes was absolutely vital to winning a war. By the time the Second World War broke out, cryptanalysis, the art of making and breaking codes, was well on its way to becoming a science. A small group of Polish mathematicians had broken the supposedly unbreakable German Enigma code in 1934. When America entered the war, the fledgling U.S. Signal Corps, later the National Security Agency, was able to keep one step ahead of the constantly mutating code, giving Allied generals and admirals advanced knowledge of German strategy. But in order to keep up with the ever-changing code, they had been forced to devise a means of making the large numbers of calculations required. What they came up with was a huge mechanical calculator they called a computation machine. These computation machines made cryptanalysis a viable science. As it turned out, they also gave the United States a huge advantage in harnessing the energy that would change the world.
During World War II, we of course were on a crash program to develop the atomic bomb, which required substantial computation. Dr. John von Neumann at Los Alamos and Dr. Alan Turing, both world-class scientists, collaborated to give us what we know today as the modern computer, both for the atomic bomb and also to unravel the Enigma codes of the Germans.
The invention of the atomic bomb undoubtedly changed the course of world history, but the invention of the computer itself has probably brought about even greater changes. Rabbi Michael Ber Weissmandl, a childhood Talmudic and mathematical prodigy in Czechoslovakia prior to World War II, survived the Holocaust and after the war emigrated to the United States. Weissmandl, while still a young man, had stumbled onto the notes of the 13th century Rabbi Bakya, suggesting that divine information could be derived from the Torah by means of skipping a specific interval of letters. Now, with all the horror behind him, Weissmandl returned to the fascination of his youth, the possibility of a mysterious Bible code.
Rabbi Weissmandl, through his diligence and determination in his studies of the Torah, made some remarkable discoveries. The word Torah in Hebrew consists of 4 letters, a tau, a vav, a resh, and a he, which are equivalent for us to talk about it as if it was a T, an O, an R, and an H. We should note here that the Hebrew alphabet consists of 22 letters that are essentially consonants. Vowels are generally simply inferred. The vav operates sort of what we would consider as an O, but is not considered a vowel. In the book of Genesis, if you go to the first equivalent of a T and count 49 letters and then take the next one, in other words the 50th letter, is the equivalent of what we would consider a vav. It's what we would consider an O. You count another 50 letters, it's a resh, or like our R. You count another 50 letters, and you come to a he, or like an H. In other words, it's as if you found a T-O-R-H at 49 letter intervals. It spells the word Torah. Rather remarkable in its own right, but one of those things you could dismiss as just a happenstance. But when you get to Exodus, you discover the same thing happens. You come to a T, 49 letters plus 1, you get to the O, the R, and the H the same way. And so again, this starts to look very designed. In fact, it's rather interesting that this number 50 are the number of days from the Exodus to the giving of the Torah at Mount Sinai. In pursuing this further, you go to the book of Leviticus, the 3rd book, and nothing like this happens. But you go to the 4th book of the Torah, the book of Numbers, the same thing happens, but only if you spell Torah backwards. Kind of weird. You go to the book of Deuteronomy, again you find the equivalent thing, but only if you spell it backwards. Now, you wonder, what does this mean? And you stand back from it all. It's as if those 4 books are pointing to the middle book, 2 forward, 2 back, to the book of Leviticus. So you examine Leviticus more carefully, and you discover not 49 letter intervals, but 7 letter intervals. Every 8th letter, you have the word Yahweh, or the name of God. And you stand back from this whole thing and you realize the Torah is always pointing to the name of God. Rabbi Weissmandel's discovery is the first modern hint of hidden codes in the Bible, and of course has led to using computer to find others. Professor Daniel Michelson at UCLA has estimated that the probability of Weissmandel's discovery happening by accident is less than 1 in 3 million.
This discovery also has great significance to the ancient menorah lampstand, still used in Jewish practices today.
Like the lamps in Israel's ancient lampstand, the Hebrew word for law was encoded at 50-letter intervals in the opening paragraphs of Genesis and Exodus. The Eastern lamps point toward the servant lamp, the lamp of God, which was elevated above the others. Leviticus reveals that servant lamp design with Yahweh, the Hebrew word for Jehovah, encoded at 8-letter intervals in its opening verse. In the ancient menorah, the western lamps were reversed to point toward the servant lamp. Following that design, the word Torah was found to be encoded backwards in the introductory paragraphs of Numbers and Deuteronomy. Just as the lamps on either side of Israel's ancient menorah were ignited from the flame of the elevated lamp of God, these 4 encoded Torahs point to the glory of Yahweh, or Jehovah, in Leviticus.